Oh, here we are. Here we are. Time for the show. The show. Has there ever been more of an exciting time to be alive? The first ever guest on a Comparison Group podcast.
Let me tell you. It's a world that man can eat at all. When things are big that should be small. Who can tell what magic spells will.
Here it comes. I promised it to you, and it's coming. Some people said it would never happen. Some people said it would never happen, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen today. Today.
And nothing's going to change the way we live. Because we can always take but never give. And now the things are changing for the worse. See, whoa, it's a crazy world we're living in. And I just can't see that half of us immersed in sin is all we have to give these pictures made of virtue and insanity. And always seem to.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Thank you so much for being patient, for hanging in there with me until I could get my guest in. But let me just say thank you for all the nice comments and the listens to the most recent episodes of the Comparison Guy podcast. What? Comparison Guy podcast? We'll talk about it later. Don't worry. Don't worry. We're still the Comparison Group. We're still the last line of defense in this country against crazy. But I'm making a little tweak. As I say, this podcast is a work in progress. So I'm making a little tweak to the title of the show to make it a little easier for people to understand what we're doing here. The Comparison Guy podcast. As I say, we'll talk about it more later. Let's not delay for even another instant. Even another instant. I bet you haven't been anticipating something this huge since perhaps maybe the birth of your first child. That's the only thing to compare to the excitement of this moment. Let's bring on the first ever guest to the Comparison Guy podcast. Special guest, say hello.
Hello, glad to be here.
Oh, who is that? That sounds like me. Who is that? It's Comparison Group Guy Senior. It's my dad. Oh, my dad is on the show. Dad, am I pronouncing that right?
Close enough.
Get right up on the microphone. I don't want people to miss a word of your nonsense.
Okay, I'm right up on it.
All right. Let me explain to the audience how this all came about. There's people out there right now with their mouths on the floor. What is he doing on his podcast? Why would he have him on his podcast? Let me explain. We have been getting into a pretty good back and forth in reference to Trump, Donald Trump, and Trump supporters. Sometimes even I would call it heated exchanges. So I said, you know what? This needs to go on the podcast. I need to speak to you about this on the podcast because I think this is the crust of what the problem is in this country. There is a disconnect. This Trump effect has caused a disconnect between people who actually are in agreement. We don't even know we're in agreement. And so I wanted to have my dad on to ask some questions, to do kind of a little interview and discuss what we've been discussing off the air. And now I promised you, Dad, that I would not pull any punches here, or I shouldn't say pull any punches. I wouldn't take any shots at you, any unfair shots. I'd give you the opportunity to speak your mind, say what you want to say. I'm not going to ask you any gotcha questions. I'm not going to sneak anything up on you. I'm going to give you a fair interview. So my first question to you, why did you abandon my mother? Go ahead. Take all the time you need.
We know your time is valuable. Thank you for holding. Someone will be with you as soon as possible.
Hello? Hello? Oh, he wants to duck that question. Okay, fine. No problem. He actually did give an answer. I had to edit it out. It wasn't bad, but he doesn't know what to say. So let's get down to the business at hand. Why you're really here. The biggest disagreement I think we have for people who don't necessarily support Donald Trump. They don't like Donald Trump. But whose fault is Donald Trump? Who do we blame for Donald Trump? I think you would say you blame Trump supporters. I would say I blame everyone for Donald Trump. And the second biggest area of disagreement that we've had is, what is the strategy? What should be the strategy for dealing with Donald Trump? So going to the questions, and let me just let the audience know, I gave you questions ahead of time because in my opinion, the best conversation is when both people know what they're talking about, both people are prepared, and both people sound intelligent. I know we like to go to these YouTube clips where people sound like idiots or people say, oh, check out this conservative, own this liberal on this issue, or talk out this Trump supporter, get destroyed by so-and-so. But I think a good conversation is a conversation where both people have a point to make. And so going now to some of the questions I sent to you, let me ask you, so we know where you're coming from. What do you think of Donald Trump?
I think he is the wrong person, definitely, to be president of the United States. He's the wrong person for a lot of things, but he should be nowhere near the White House. He's somewhat pathetic.
Who do you blame for his popularity?
I don't know how popular he is, but I blame people who want to see this government fail. People who want to go back to the way it was in the 60s, because that's just where he would take us.
Do you think liberal media should accept any blame for his popularity?
Not totally. Not totally.
But somewhat?
Maybe somewhat.
Because you would say they cover him too much or the way they cover him?
Well, he is news, and you're obligated to put the news out, so I don't think they cover him too much, but he's just a person that you can't ignore.
Do you think Democrats, and by that I mean Democratic voters, Democratic politicians, should accept any of the blame, not for him necessarily getting elected the first time around, but the fact that we can't get rid of him? Do you think Democrats should accept any responsibility for that?
Very little. It was the Republicans who wouldn't do away with all his antics and went along with everything. So the Republican Party is the reason why he has such a hold, because they ignored and approved all his stupidity. It was only a couple of Republicans who stood up and said how wrong he was. Everybody else went along with his antics.
Why do you think they did that?
Loyal Republicans, and always making excuses, and thought he would come around, but he only got worse. He never came around to. He's not a politician. He's just somebody who's living off the Trump name. That's all.
What do you think are the reasons? What reasons do you think people voted for Donald Trump in 2016?
Because they wanted to see change in the federal government, but they didn't know that he would change it for the worse.
Don't you come on this podcast and start getting all Mr. Nice Guy. You know what you want to say. What you say to me off the air, you say because they're stupid.
Hey, do you see some of Trump's supporters? Do you listen to some of Trump's supporters? They're just followers. They have no minds of their own. They're sad when you listen to them and do interviews. You know, they're followers. That's all they are.
Can you think of any legitimate reason to vote for Donald Trump? Any legitimate reason?
None.
None.
None at all.
You can't give me any legitimate reason why you would understand a person voting for Donald Trump.
It's been chaos since the day he came down that escalator. So he got very little done in his 4 years as president because he had too much baggage. So, no.
So this is the point of this interview and the point of my podcast that I've been doing for over 2 years. It might be 3 years now. This is where I see the disagreement, because I blame, as I said, everyone for Donald Trump. I think everyone has to take some responsibility. If you were to ask me, what would be some of the reasons that someone would vote for Donald Trump in 2016? I feel like I should know if I'm listening and talking to people who support Donald Trump. So let me just give you a rundown of some things that I've heard, whether it's listening to conservative media or talking to people who are Trump supporters, or just basic common sense of why somebody would vote for Donald Trump being a Republican. The farmers and the steel workers. He made a big case. China's eating our lunch. And they believed it. They felt he would come in and he would do something to improve trade with China. What, are you trying to take a drink? I mean, I think 6 beers is plenty for you. If you want another, go ahead, take a sip.
Shit, I mean,
Don't be loud about it. An overbearing federal government. I mean, that's just a Republican thing. They hate the regulations. They hate being told what to do by a federal government, whether it's on LGBTQ issues, whether it's on abortions. They believe in states' rights. Immigration. At this point, there should be very little argument that immigration is a big problem given what we've seen going on with migrants being bused to New York City and other places. Obviously, it's an issue. Who's to blame for the issue is an argument to be had, but immigration is a serious issue that people in border states have been dealing with that Democrats haven't really addressed in a strong way. America first. It sounds like a slogan, but people like that. People like a guy who comes along and says, I'm going to put America first. We're going to stop all this nation building elsewhere, and we're going to do some nation building here at home. Under Barack Obama, there were winners and losers. Some people did well under Barack Obama. I think he was a good president for the country, for the economy, but not everyone profited under Barack Obama. Another issue, another reason, they felt like finally somebody came along that they could relate to, for better or for worse. Whether you like the things they were relating to, they felt like he was their guy. He wasn't a John McCain. They liked John McCain. He wasn't a Mitt Romney. They were okay with Mitt Romney, but he was a Donald Trump. He was one of them. That's how they saw him. I'll keep going. Their vote mattered. They finally felt like their vote mattered. It's like the difference between living in the state of Ohio and the state of California. In California, you know who's going to get the electoral votes for president. But Ohio, it really matters who you vote for. So they finally had the opportunity to say, man, it really matters. No matter what state they were in, they felt like their vote really mattered. Last but not least, they know he ain't religious. They know he ain't religious, but there's a whole heck of a lot more on their side of what will be put in place in terms of abortion laws or the laws that they want than Hillary was ever going to be. So those are reasons why I think people voted for Donald Trump in 2016 that had nothing to do with stupidity, nothing to do with wanting to destroy the country or our democracy. Now, if you ask me why they would vote for him again, forget about all those answers and go with one. Hatred. Hatred. They hate the way he was treated, has been treated. They hate the way they're treated, and they're looked at in this country ever since Donald Trump was president for 4 years. What say you to all that?
one thing, Donald Trump,
Get nice and close to that microphone. I don't want to miss a minute of your nonsense.
he never won a popular vote. He lost a popular vote in 2016 and 2020. It's electoral votes that put him in. And Trump, he doesn't give a hoot about this country or the people in it. He's all about Donald Trump. The only reason why he's running for president is to get himself out of jail. He couldn't care less about democracy. He'd do away with the Constitution. He would try to be a dictator. I don't know what people fail to see with him. He's just not a person that can be trusted. He figured out if you tell 150 lies a day and confuse people, some of it's going to stick. And that's what he does. He comes up with conspiracy theories, lies. We will never know how the shape this country is in if he's in the White House, because he will lie and Russia and China will be on our doorsteps and he will still be lying. So you can't trust him. You can't turn your back on him. That's been proven. So why would you put a person like that? Ever since Barack Obama was the last president where I would say the federal government was decent. After that, it went downhill. When John McCain died and all these other cronies came along, it ruined the Republican Party, and I don't know what it's going to take to get it back. First off, we got to get rid of Donald Trump. He has to go.
I'm going to come back and ask you your ideas on getting rid of him, but you said a lot about Donald, a lot of negative things about Donald there. Let me ask you, do you think we are ever overestimating giving Donald Trump too much credit for just how much damage he can do to the country. And when I say that, what I mean is you hear people go, oh, he could have his the nuclear codes. We're going to get this man the nuclear codes. Well, if it's that easy to launch a nuclear bomb, then we need to seriously look at our protocols on launching a nuclear bomb. I tend to think we overdo it sometimes on the power that we believe he will have as president. He'll have as much power as we allow him to have. So do you think we ever overestimate how much damage he can do? Again, given we saw what he did for 4 years, are we overestimating what he could do if he goes back into office?
No, because he's going to put his cronies, anybody who will just bow down to whatever he says and do his bidding. He won't have people in place to check his foolishness. So he's already lining people up that will just do all of his bidding. And if they have control of the houses of the Senate,
And the House,
the Senate and the House, you can't stop him. He already is trying to get complete immunity. Why would he want total immunity if he doesn't plan on doing outlandish things? So no, I think he could do plenty of damage to this country, and other nations won't want to deal with us. And Putin, he's already figured out if you stroke him, you can get anything from him. So, he could do more damage to this country than you ever could realize, and they would not stop him. They would let him do it because they're afraid of him.
So you brought up a legitimate point. Putin has figured out how to stroke Trump's ego and probably get what he wants from Trump when he was in office, if he should get reelected back to office. It's obvious to think that he's not going to be the same president that Joe Biden is when it comes to Ukraine or NATO or anything going on in Europe. He would be more friendly to Putin, regardless of what he says. I'm the toughest on Russia. I'm the toughest on Putin. There's no question he would be more friendly to Putin than Joe Biden would be. And Putin knows that. Xi in China knows that. Lil Kim in North Korea knows that. It seems like everyone knows to stroke Donald Trump's ego to get what you want from him. Why do you think we didn't realize that back in 2016 when he was elected president? Do you think things could have gone differently with him as president if more people had stroked his ego, accepted him as president, than right away coming after him with the collusion with Russia and this investigation and that investigation?
I think all of Trump's problems he brought on himself. And I don't think if we had stroked him and praised him, he would have done anything different, because he never thinks he does anything wrong. He thinks everything he does is right. He couldn't even accept the national weather telling him that a storm wasn't going to hit us. He had to go get him a Sharpie and change it. I mean, no, he is just all about Donald Trump and the Trumpettes. And that's what will happen if he's put back in the White House. The Trumpettes are going to come out of the woodwork, those two knucklehead sons. And none of them understand politics, even Trump. Trump didn't even understand how NATO works. And so, and they say he doesn't like to read. He has a short attention span. What don't people see with this guy?
Well, that's the question. That's the question. It's a fair question. I always say it's a fair question. Your guy you just love on MSNBC, Morning Joe, he's always asking the question, what is it people don't see? What is it? How can? Why would? We just keep asking the same question over and over again. And I go back to, let me put it to you this way. Donald Trump is like a drug dealer. The media are like drug dealers. The drug dealer is going to keep dealing the drugs. They ain't going to stop. If they're profiting from it, they're not going to stop. It's up to us, the addicts, to stop. The addicts have to change their behavior. The drug dealer will never change if they're profiting. And I'm right there with you. I believe Donald Trump is all about what profits me. How can I make money? I think he's just a frustrated radio guy. He would love to be on radio. I think it drives him crazy to see people getting rich in media talking about him. Why can't he get rich talking about himself? Why do other people have to get rich talking about him? And so he's just a frustrated media personality that wants to make money. I agree with that. But we're the addicts because we keep feeding this beast in this country right now, what I've called the Trump effect. We just keep playing into what he's doing to the country. Agree or disagree?
Well, you say people keep feeding into what he's putting out there. But like I say, he's figured out, you say enough off the wall, crazy stuff and confuse people about the truth, which he is good at because he just rolls over the same lies, tells them in a different way, and people, after a while, they don't know what to believe, so they start to believe what he's saying. I don't understand, because you could have it on video, you could have it on tape with him lying, and people still don't pick up on it. I'm just confused about the fact that people can't pick up on all the untruth that he's about.
I think a lot of it has to do with there's a whole nother media out there that people aren't aware of, that they don't listen to. For instance, you don't listen to my podcast. Now, I'll probably say that 50 more times before we're done here. You do not listen to my podcast. You hear that, America? You hear that, the world? My own father doesn't listen to my podcast. I did an episode entitled, Finally the Answer, the Reason People Support Donald Trump. I don't think I would be overstating it to say it was probably the greatest piece of audio ever produced in the history of mankind. That's what I think. I broke it down. I gave all these different reasons why people support Donald Trump. Once again, the episode entitled, Finally the Answer, the Reason People Support Donald Trump. I broke it down. I segmented it into 3 parts. The first part had to do with psychology. The second part had to do with, what was it? The second part had to do, I forget what the second part had to do with, but the second part had to do with the hatred that we have that has grown between one another in this country. We went from a dislike and a disagreement to a hatred and thinking the other side is evil. That's well documented. We all know that. And the third part had to do with, you have to admit, Donald Trump hasn't always been wrong about every single thing. Controversial for me to say that. Go listen to the episode. You'll understand where I'm coming from. But part of the problem, I believe, is we're not listening to one another. We're not listening to what else is out there. And so, yes, people fall for a lot of things they never should fall for. Never should fall for. They believe things they never should believe. But what I've always said to that is if I'm misinformed, if I'm being lied to and I'm misinformed, tell me where I can go to get informed. Can I go to MSNBC? Yeah, right. Can I go to CNN? Heck no. Tell me where I can go. Tell me the media show I can go to, the cable news show. Tell me the radio show. Tell me the podcast on the left that I can go to be informed with what I'm not being informed on the right, that won't condescend to me, that won't call me stupid, that won't tell me I'm wrong about everything, that won't make me feel bad about myself. So that's part of the problem. We can talk all we want about people being lied to and believing nonsense, but when it comes to, okay, well, where will they go to get informed? There is nowhere. But let me ask you this in terms of people believing things. Do you think an election in this country can be stolen?
I don't see how an election can be stolen where there could be so much fraud that it could be stolen. There's too many checks and balances. Donald Trump started this stolen election even before he was running for the second time. He put that out there because he was afraid he was going to lose. He made statements like, "Can you see me losing to Sleepy Joe?" And that's just what he did. Now he's all embarrassed about it. He's embarrassed that he's a one-term president and that Barack Obama and Clinton and Bush, they were all 2 terms. So his little feelings are hurt. So that's why he's coming back trying to do another term, because he feels slighted. That's all. He couldn't care less about this country. Or he ruined the border deal. They had a deal that seemed like it would have helped the border. But no, he'd rather see people suffer than to give Joe Biden any credit. It just goes to show he's all about himself. He doesn't care who he hurts. But the media, I mean, you mentioned that you can't trust CNN, MSNBC, but do you want to go to Fox? Do you want to go to Fox and believe what they say? I mean, I would go to the other 2 before I would even consider listening to Fox, because they have no shame, none at all. So say what you want to say about CNN and the other, and One America and all that. You gotta look for some truth and go where things make sense. Fox doesn't make sense on anything. They twist it all up. That's why they had to pay you all that money. Just stupid.
Well, you don't listen to my podcast.
I listen to a couple of them.
You don't listen to my podcast.
I try to stay awake.
So I'll put you to sleep. You're not the only one.
I've heard of several of your podcasts, and I agree with most of the stuff that you say.
Well, what I always talk about on my podcast, what I've mentioned to you also, is we know we have liberal media and we have conservative media. It's just as simple as that. For anyone to act like, there's anyone out there who's being fair, completely fair and unbiased in their news reporting on cable TV right now is just ridiculous. So Fox News has their slant, MSNBC has their slant, CNN don't know what they want to be. But I have made the point since I started doing this podcast that Joe Biden has got to go to Fox News. Now, knowing Fox News a little bit better than someone who maybe doesn't regularly watch Fox News, not that I regularly watch it, but I watch it enough to know they got a Neil Cavuto, they got a Harris Faulkner, they got a Brett Baer. I actually was just looking, you're not going to believe this, I can bring it up. I was actually just looking at the lineup of Fox News from 6 a.m. up to 11 o'clock at night and MSNBC from 6 a.m. up to 11 o'clock at night. And Fox News, actually, to me, if you go through the entire day, they have what I would consider more people on that will give you a balanced view of things. It'll skew to the right. No question about that. It'll be more center right. But from Morning Joe on MSNBC up through the entire day to Joy Reid, to Rachel Maddow whenever she's on, to Alex Wagner, to some of the people that are on during the day on MSNBC, they are far left people to me. There's no balance there whatsoever, if you ask me. Maybe you get, I think Andrea Kramer is on there during the day. But for the most part, they're at least equal in their bias, if not Fox News being a little less biased with their afternoon shows, their late morning and afternoon shows. That's just the way I see it. And so if we talk about a media being fair in their coverage, I don't think we have it anywhere. Like I said, it's nowhere to be found out there, and that's part of the big problem. Barack Obama, I played the clip. Barack Obama was asked, maybe about a year or so ago, he was on a podcast, and he said, the greatest risk to this country right now is 2 different realities. People living in 2 different realities. He didn't say he didn't say Donald Trump. He didn't say threat to our democracy. He didn't say North Korea. He didn't say Putin and Russia. He said the greatest risk to our country, to our democracy, is 2 different realities. And so I always bring it back to, how are we ever going to get back to a place where we can get back to just a simple dislike and disagreement rather than a hatred and thinking the other side is evil? How are we ever going to get back to that?
Well, what you're saying is you don't particularly trust what any media outlet is saying. You don't believe any of them are telling you the truth. But in some cases, you can see the truth versus some outlandish conspiracy theories. And yeah, you could get back to coverage that you can believe. You don't have to believe everything, but if you don't research it, they fact check certain things. You know, some of, I don't know, maybe you're asking for CNN, MSNBC to say as much good about Trump and the Republican Party as they do bad. But there's not that much good going on with Donald Trump and the Republican. So how can you balance when there's so much craziness going on with Donald Trump and the Republican? They put out just outlandish stuff every day that it's hard to believe anything they say. So the media, to me, just reports the craziness that's going on really in the federal government.
Let me answer you a question, because it's an excellent question. Excellent question. A question that everyone should be asking themselves. Can you trust any media? Is there any media you can trust out there? Not that I know of. Not that I can find right now. Why? Because they're all for profit. I've made the point. Information at some point can't be all for profit. I'll give you an example when I talk about MSNBC and Morning Joe. I've been railing on him big time. Morning Joe likes to come on and say, Donald Trump said he'll be a dictator on day one. Everyone has picked up on that. Donald Trump says he's going to be a dictator on day one. Joe Biden says it. Donald Trump is going to be a dictator on day one. Well, that's not what Donald Trump said. It's not what he said. Donald Trump said, no, I'll be a dictator, back and forth with Sean Hannity, maybe for one day. Maybe on the first day. Maybe just on the first day. So it's one of those stupid, jokey, kind of a, not a joke, but it is a joke thing with Donald Trump. Then Morning Joe will say, Donald Trump, bloodbath. There's going to be a bloodbath if I don't get elected. Well, again, is that what he said? Is that what he meant? Are we reading too much into it? It's once again one of those inappropriate, crazy things that Donald Trump says that I think gets spun into something that it's really not. What I would rather see come out of Joe Biden in particular, if Donald Trump says, I'm going to be a dictator, I don't want Joe Biden to jump all over that and say, he said he's going to be a dictator. He says he's going to be a dictator. I want Joe Biden to say, not my country, not in this country. I don't know who Donald Trump thinks he is, but not the good Americans, the patriots I know in Tennessee and Virginia and Oklahoma and West Virginia and Ohio and Michigan. That's more of what I want to see. That will bring the country together a lot quicker than always jumping on everything and spinning everything. That's what the media does. They spin everything to create an emotional reaction. They need an emotional reaction. Emotional reactions get ratings, whether it's joy, sadness, anger, or fear. They need an emotional reaction. We get too much of that, and it turns into a biased media. If you enjoy 100% of what Morning Joe says, or you enjoy 100% of what Fox News says, the Fox and Friends in the Morning Show, then it's biased media. You should not enjoy and agree with 100% of what any information source says. So yes, I don't trust any of them. Is it different? Is the misinformation different? Is it different to say an election was stolen? We have proof the election was stolen and we're going to give you the evidence, and to say, spin something crazy that Donald Trump said? Is it different? Of course it's different. But worse isn't better. That's something else I've say all the time on this podcast. Just because the other side is worse, if you're doing it too, that don't make you better.
Well, there was a time in politics where you could take the politicians maybe at their word. But Trump changed all that when he came on board, because he flip-flopped everything. He backtracked on it. He would change statements. He would change the meaning of statements. So he's the one that brought the political scene down to the gutter. He's the one that changed how people think and how, there's total disrespect of anything anymore because Donald Trump never had respect since he came on board. So white supremacists, they feel empowered now. They're standing by for when he gets elected because he praises them to a certain extent. So, it's not the same. You could go back to the Kennedy days or Eisenhower where you admired politicians, but not the politicians of today, not since Trump came on and just changed the whole way you look at politics. Look at the people that came, the Marjorie Taylor Greens that are all of a sudden out there with their rudeness and ignorant and stupid ways. It's just a totally different political scene. You can't respect it. You can't trust it because everybody is hating on everybody. So that's just the way it is nowadays. I don't know if it'll ever get back to a government you can respect because you can't respect it right now.
So I'll give you a little bit more on whose fault this whole Trump thing is. I'm trying to stay focused on those issues. Whose fault is it and what do we do about it? And then I'm also going to kind of touch on why I think it's important, because otherwise, what reason do we have to even have a conversation? There's got to be an understanding that it is important to figure this stuff out. Given what we know about Donald Trump, given what we know about his unwillingness to accept the results of elections, do you think that Joe Biden and the Democrats should be doing more to prepare the country for A, the outcome of the election, and B, doing more to secure the trust in the election? And by that, I mean, should it be going to the Trump campaign and saying, hey, guys, we know how this is going to go. Why don't we put in place some guidelines to ensure and oversee the security of this next election? And then I've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And with all due respect, you said something really silly. And remember, I said with all due respect, you said that you think if Trump loses again, that's it for him. He'll go away. I don't see any way Donald Trump goes away. Whether he loses or not, he'll go, well, they stole it from us again. Trump 2028. He won't go anywhere. So should the Democrats be preparing the country for the outcome of the election, assuming they think they're going to win? We don't want a civil war to break out, especially if you believe Trump with his bloodbath statements. And should they be going to the Trump campaign and saying, hey, let's put in some guidelines to make sure we all believe this election is fair and we accept the results of it, whoever wins? Do you think they should be doing something in that respect?
And I think if Trump loses, I think his supporters are going to say, I'm not going to follow this fool.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But continue.
I'm not going to follow this fool and end up locked up in jail like the January 6 people. I think the Republican Party would breathe a sigh of relief and say, let's just get away from this guy and get back to our political issues. He, I think, will fade away.
I'm just going to interrupt you just for a second, if I could, because I don't want to lose this point, because this is such an important point. You're saying that you think if he loses, his supporters will finally, I guess, give up on him or lose interest in him. I do not know if the Democrats realize how close they were to moving past Donald Trump. I do not. It drives me crazy. Again, I do this little podcast. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody listens to anything I say because they don't know who I am. They don't like it because I try and give both points of view. I don't go hard on support for one side or the other. I don't root for one side or the other. I always say I root for America. But way back prior to the midterm elections, I was listening to conservative media, and the narrative that started to develop on the conservative media was, hey, everybody, we won. We won. It's time to move on. We can accept the victory. Donald Trump drained the swamp. Donald Trump got us all these judges. He put in place over 200 judges. He remade the Supreme Court the way we want it. And they ran down this list of accomplishments of Donald Trump and said, we did it. We did it, everybody. We win, they lose. That was their way of moving past Donald Trump, getting their people to move past Donald Trump. Because as you said, they see him as a liability. He's a moneymaker for them, but he's a liability. They know that. But the Democrats just would not let this man go. They just had to indict him. They just had to keep him in the media. They just had to follow every single thing he said and tweeted and every brain fart he ever had. And you can look at the polls that's been talked about in the media. When that first indictment came down for Donald Trump, up he went in the polls. His support was starting to dip. He wasn't getting people turning out for his rallies. You look at the whole thing with him in court over the Stormy Daniels thing. The media goes on, Donald Trump is sad. Nobody's showing up to support him. None of his people are showing up. He's sad. The late night TV guys, Donald Trump is sad. Nobody's showing up to support. Next thing, what do you know? You got somebody setting themselves on fire out in front of the court. All of a sudden, people start showing up. And so I go back to it. It's everyone's fault that we can't get rid of Donald Trump. It's not him. It's not his supporters. It's everyone's fault. They can't let go of this addiction to whether it's driving people crazy by supporting Donald Trump or whether it's determined to get that Cousin Vinny moment that I talked about where one day everyone wakes up and goes, oh my God, we were so wrong about this all along. We feel like fools. They're waiting for that Cousin Vinny moment. It ain't going to happen. But that's where we are. That's the problem. We can't get off this addiction.
Well, I got to tell you, nobody showed up for Trump to support him at the courthouse until the media pointed out that nobody showed up. And here come Trump Jr., and then all the other cronies started showing up. But nobody was interested in going to the courthouse until the media asked where is all his supporters. And Trump said they're keeping the supporters 7 blocks away. He don't have any supporters out there. So people are backing off of him.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I said it. You don't listen to this podcast. You don't listen to it. I said it over a year ago. I said, if people are truly moving away from Donald Trump, I said, let them move away from Donald Trump. I can remember my exact words. I said, if they are turning the page on Donald Trump, let them turn the page. Don't gloat. Don't demand apologies. Don't look for people to say, I'm sorry, I can't believe I ever supported this man. I think people have to realize, you made a point a second ago, something popped in my head, where I said to myself, you're right. No one wants to feel stupid. No one wants to feel like they're being played. And so when it comes to Donald Trump, no one wants to really sit at home and watch TV and go, man, he's saying the same thing now he was saying way back in 2016. And in 2016, he was lying then. No one wants to feel stupid. And so they'll never come to you and say, you know, all this time I've been an idiot. I should have never been supporting him. What they'll do is they'll just gradually move away. They'll stop watching. They'll stop talking about him. They'll stop, putting the flags out in front of their houses. But they're never going to come out and say, oh, my God, we were so wrong. We were so wrong and you were so right. But it seems like that's what people want. I can remember watching a clip, maybe on CNN. They were interviewing a guy. They were having this big boat rally somewhere in Florida, and everybody had their Trump flags. And this guy had all Trump flags all over his boat. And they talked to him. I love Donald Trump. Donald Trump has saved this country. Donald Trump is the best thing ever happened to this country. And they said, who are you going to vote for in the Florida primary? And he said, probably DeSantis. Donald Trump just has too much baggage. Again, that was before all the indictments started to come. All those indictments flipped everything. It flipped everything. It made people say, you're not going to take him away from us. We'll give him up. We'll let him go when we decide to let him go, but you are not going to take him away from us. And that is what Democrats are determined to do. They are determined to find a way to either lock this man up, bankrupt this man, or make this man go away. And that is what keeps him, that's what keeps him going. That's what keeps him raising money and keeps him in the public eye. It's the determination of Democrats to take him out of the public eye. So what do? Let's switch to the strategy. What do we do about him?
I don't think he was going anywhere to begin with. Because like I say, he hates that he was a one-term president. So he wasn't going anywhere. He was playing on people's feelings that he's the victim. And the Republican Party fell for it. So I don't know if he was going to go away and not run in 2020. I believe he would have stayed. But you can't get away from him as long as you continue to support everything he does. And that's what so many people do. And I think it's people who just want to see the way the government functions now. They want to see it just crumble. But crumble into what? Trumpism? I don't think that's a good way for it to go. So, like I say, he needs to lose this election, and people just need to say they've had enough of what he's about.
Well, the problem with that, people are never going to get to the point where they say quietly to themselves, move on, unless they can get to the point to where they can see eye to eye, unless they can feel like the other side is reaching out to them and taking their concerns seriously. Where, I mean, look, people have been angry in this country for a long time. Donald Trump didn't come along and create all this anger. I mean, there were people who were mad if they had to press 1 for English when they call customer service. People have been angry about a lot of different things for a long time in this country, and a lot of those things have been ignored. And as I say, they've been condescended to and told that they're stupid and told that they're living in the dark ages and they got to get with the times and just accept things for the way they are. And so Donald Trump played up on those things. He played on those things, but he didn't create those things. And he has a very distinct strategy. We need a strategy to fight his strategy. And I made these notes. When it comes to terrorists, they have a strategy. Win by bankrupting America. You're not going to beat America on the battlefield. You're not going to defeat our military. So their strategy is keep drawing America into these conflicts, keep them fighting, and that'll bankrupt America. It ain't working. It ain't going to work. But that's been the terrorist strategy. We know that. Russia's strategy, sow division. Sow division in this country. They pump all kinds of misinformation into this country in ways that we can't even imagine. And yes, I will concede the Republican Party picks up on some of that misinformation and goes right along with it. It's a disgrace. But that's Russia's strategy. They can't defeat us militarily. Just pump information and keep us divided and keep us fighting with one another. Iran's strategy, keep the Jewish people and the Arab people fighting one another. There are people who say that's what October 7th was all about. They didn't want to see Israel and Saudi Arabia come to terms with one another. And so they want to keep the two sides fighting. China, their strategy, just smile and be patient. Smile and be patient. Wait for America to destroy itself from inside. Donald Trump's strategy, provoke and profit. That's his strategy, provoke and profit. So we look at all of these different enemies, if we want to call them that, of this country. If you see Donald Trump as an enemy of this country, his strategy is provoke and profit. Why do we make it so easy for these enemies to do exactly what we know they're trying to do? Everyone knows, he's saying that crazy thing so he can provoke a reaction out of the media, so he can get attention, so he can raise money. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene does. That's what Matt Gaetz does. That's what Lauren Boebert does. That's what they all do. They just say these crazy things to raise money. Why do we keep obliging them on their strategy? Why?
Because people jump on board without giving things much thought. And they believe in these conspiracy theories. They don't research. They don't listen intently and try to analyze. They just jump on the bandwagon. It sounds good, so let's go with it. And people are scared and nervous about the direction of the country. They see things that they don't understand, so they try to latch on to something that they might understand, no matter how wrong and stupid it is. And people don't pick up on the news. They get bits and pieces of information, and they don't put things together, and you have somebody telling them what they want to hear, and people, when you tell them what they want to hear, they'll go with it. And that's our weakness. And Trump divided the country for his benefit, and he has no wish to pull it back together. He has no desire to bring people together. As long as he can create chaos and dissension and mistrust, there's people out there that just go along with that. And I've worked with people like that. And every day was a disaster, just like every day in this country. Donald Trump is the reason that there are guns. Everybody has a gun from 14-year-olds and up. He's the one that preached, they're going to take your guns. They're going to do away with the Second Amendment. They're coming for your guns. You won't be able to defend your homes. Got to go out and get an AK-47. And now, every single day, people are gunned down just for bumping into someone. But the point is that everybody is armed. And Donald Trump started that because it was a campaign issue with the NRA. He wanted the gun lovers' votes. But now, look what it's costing us. The shootings at the schools, people getting into accidents and gunfights breaking out. And that's all he's about. That's all he's done to this country. Things like that. The pandemic. We couldn't have had a worse person in charge doing COVID.
Oh, here we go.
We couldn't. People say he's responsible for 1 million deaths. He's responsible for a lot of deaths because he was the worst person to have running this nation. We stumbled through COVID, and it shouldn't have been. Thank God Joe Biden came along to get the vaccines out there. I give Trump credit because he rushed the development of the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
But if he had stayed president, he would have wanted his name on every bottle of vaccine that went out the door and would have held it up until his name was on every bottle of vaccine. So now.
You were doing so good. You were doing so good with the people don't think, and people want to go to sources of information that tell them what they want to hear. 100% agree with you on that. 100%. That is the problem. That is the problem why the provoke to profit wins strategy for people who want to use that strategy. I'm going to keep on saying outlandish, crazy things, and I'm going to provoke a reaction, and then when I get the reaction, I'm going to profit from it. I'm right with you. The gun thing, that I disagree with you on because the gun thing was an issue long before Donald Trump came along. I don't think Donald Trump came along and everybody suddenly started running out and buying guns. I think that the Democrats have struggled to figure out how to turn gun control into gun safety. I think they've failed to figure out how to message to people to just get some simple common sense laws passed on gun safety because it freaks them out in tough states and tough districts. They know they will lose on an issue. It's an issue like abortion. They know it's a tough issue across the country, and Republicans know that too. And not to get off on this a whole nother area here, but Republicans have a strategy, another strategy. I've talked about this before, played clips before, on abortion, on guns. If you push hard, extreme right, it forces the left to go in the other direction. And then it makes them look like they're extreme on those issues. That is the strategy. It's a stated strategy. They've said it out loud. Steve Bannon has said it. If you push hard on an issue to the right, the Democrats have no choice but to push hard the other way, and it makes them look like they're now extreme. An example is abortion. You hear somebody say, oh, we should lock up abortion doctors. And then the left comes out and says, what? That's crazy. We can't lock up abortion doctors. We can't lock up women. And now it makes it look like they're being. So it's a strategy. So again, we have to understand what's going on, where people are coming from, what strategies they're using, if we're going to ever get to the point where people can have that understanding that it's not all about you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm wrong, you're right, I'm right about everything, you're wrong about everything. That's where we are in the country. It's either you're wrong about everything or I'm right about everything. I got to be right about everything. I can't concede anything. I can't concede a single point. That's the point I want to make. I can't concede a single point. If I concede a single point to you and you're a Trump supporter, I'm now conceding that Donald Trump is a good man. It's like that's where we are. You can't concede a single thing. I'll ask you this question. And if you had a point to make it before you answer this. But I'll ask you this question. What do you think Joe Biden's biggest disaster has been as president?
That would be the border, because that's an issue that has to be resolved. And he sort of opened the border to whoever wanted to come in. He didn't want to turn anybody. He didn't want to do a Trumpism where he had people splitting families, taking kids away from families, having them in, I don't know about cages, but having them corralled. Joe Biden didn't want to go there. But as hard as Joe Biden tried to fix the border, the Republicans couldn't come together. But this goes back way before Trump and Biden, the border. But it only got worse with Trump. Biden just didn't have people to work with as far as fixing the border, even if they had improved the border. But the border is worse than ever, and they still can't come together. So that's federal government just dropping the ball on both sides. And I really thought Biden would somehow find a way to make it better, and it hasn't happened.
That's fair. That's a fair answer. I wasn't thinking you were going to come up with the border, but that's a good answer. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that the immigration issue, the border issue, is an issue that Joe Biden, from the time he came in, did not seem to know how to get his arms around. And as I've said many times, the Republicans threw him a lifeline by completely bumbling the whole border bill, by even bringing that border bill up. They had to have known that Trump wanted to use that border as an issue during the election. So to put a bill on the floor that Joe Biden and the Democrats were smart to say, oh, yeah, sure, okay, we'll do a border bill with you, that was just stupid. But my biggest issue, my biggest failure, I think, for Joe Biden has been Afghanistan. I'm glad you had an answer. It shows that you at least are willing to say, okay, yeah, I can come up with something when you say the border. My biggest issue has been Afghanistan. I think it has led to many other problems. I think it has emboldened some of our enemies. And I can remember talking about it back when it was going on, when Joe Biden was said, we don't have any strategic interest in staying in Afghanistan. And I said, our strategic interest is not looking like we're running away from Afghanistan. And that's exactly how it looked. And I think it's a disgrace that Joe Biden has never had any kind of a major ceremony for the people who served in that war for the 20 years. Now, people right away will go, we had to leave. That ain't the argument I'm having. The argument I'm having is how we left. We had an Inspector General report, not a Republican investigation, not anything biased. It was an Inspector General's report who said the people who got out of Afghanistan, that we got out of Afghanistan as refugees, were not properly vetted. Some of them were probably dangerous to this country. In addition to that, as I said, he did not honor in any real way the men and women who lost their lives fighting that war. He didn't honor their families, the Gold Star families. I think it was just a disaster. I'm surprised at the disaster that was our exit from Afghanistan. But as I say, fair, the immigration point, what do you think Joe Biden's greatest achievement has been since he's been president?
I don't have a list in front of me, but I think
list
the infrastructure, lowering the cost of medicine. I mean, he's done more than you could say the former president accomplished. And I wish I had a list, but I give him a because of all the opposition and all the roadblocks that were thrown his way. I would say I give him a C plus.
C plus.
I give him a C plus. I'd almost give him a B because of no cooperation within the government. Everybody's opposed to everything you do. These two parties, all they want to do is jockey for power. They want to be the ones in charge. They want the power. And if they got to cut your throat to have the party and let the American people suffer, so be it. Just like the border deal. They'd rather let that deal, which may have improved the border, let that deal go down the drain than have Biden get any credit because it's an election year. So, and that's what they've done these 4 years, is just not want to give an inch. There was a Republican who stood up and asked his party, what have we done? What bills have we passed that mattered? And there weren't any. There weren't any meaningful bills that the Republican Party has passed, I guess, in the last coming up on 4 years. But Joe Biden has made some progress. He's trying to do climate change, which Trump doesn't believe in. Infrastructure bill he got through. He passed, he lowered drug prescriptions so people can afford their insulin. And I can't come up with anything else off the top of my head, but I think he's done a decent job considering the opposition that he had to deal with.
It's fair to say that you could name a half dozen things. You could throw the CHIPS Act in there. Some people will say the gun reform, although I think that stopped well short of being anything really meaningful, the gun reform bill. But you could come up with a half dozen good bills, like you said, infrastructure, the prescription drug cost, the student loan debt cancellation. I would not put in there. I do not like that bill. But there's been good things that he's done, and he's done it on a bipartisan basis. People want to keep saying he's the most bipartisan president, and that's fair. But when you're saying bipartisan, you're including Republicans. You can't be bipartisan with your own party. That's not bipartisan. And so there have been Republicans that have been willing to work with him and have worked with him. They may be few and far between, but there have been. There was a very interesting clip I heard of Mike Johnson, the current Speaker of the House, where he said on a recent bill, I think it was the spending bill that they did, that there are a lot of people were all upset about, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to get rid of him over. He said, we got less than we could have gotten in that bill because of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I might put some of these clips in after we get done here. I might add them into this episode, some of the things I'm talking about. Not going to play them now. But he said in an interview with Fox News that because he could not get votes from certain Republicans in his caucus, he had to rely on Democratic votes to get the spending bill passed. And by having to rely on Democratic bills, he had to give up some of the things that they wanted. And so when you hear that and you realize what he's saying is his own party is hurting him and getting things that he would normally be able to get, like you said, it's confusing. It's confusing what's going on in this government with some of these people who all they want is attention and power to profit. Whether it's profit by staying in office, whether it's profit by other means that they have going on, whether it's people out here in the media space who are profiting by just staying around, sticking around, getting attention, getting people to like them, getting people to follow them, getting people to retweet them. Whatever it is, it's this cycle of addiction that we have to information that we have to break. We have to break the cycle of addiction of getting only information that we want and we agree with if we can get to the point to where we can have a better understanding, so we can get to a point to where, as I said, we can move back to the pre-Trump era if that's where people are trying to go. But people like you who don't listen to my podcast, you'll probably never get there because you won't know what's going on and you won't understand. What do you have to say to that?
I listen to MSNBC and CNN, so I get plenty of information. I do listen to your podcast. Can't say I haven't ever listened to one, so that's a lie. There we go with the lies. But Mike Johnson, I don't like him. He'll go with whatever's working for him, I think. I think people like him and Jim Jordan, those people, Ted Cruz and all those folks, they're just phonies. They're just there because they like the power and they like to be called senators and all that. But people like Jim Jordan, horrible folk. I think Trump's manhood fell off and became Jim Jordan.
Oh.
So,
It's a controversial statement.
well, that's the way I feel, because they're spineless people, just spineless. Don't want to stand up for what's right, continue with lies. I'm still waiting for the proof that the election was stolen. I'm waiting for the pillow man to come up with all the proof he had, and Rudy Giuliani with all the proof they had that never materialized. But those Republicans still think the election was stolen and can't prove nothing. They've ruined the lives of the mother and daughter just trying to come up with something. And if they weren't cheating, why do they need the fake electors? Why do you bring fake electors into the picture?
Oh, here we go.
If you're not cheating.
Here we go.
What can't these people see? Donald Trump is the one who was trying to steal the election. Just listen to this court trial with him and the Inquirer, burying stories and then coming up with stories on his opponents. He's the cheat. He's the slime ball.
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right there.
I understand.
How dare you? Now, I'm going to stop you because we're running along and we're getting into a whole nother topic. I wanted to stick with our biggest disagreement.
I understand.
Who's to blame for Trump? Who's to blame? Is it Trump supporters? Is it everyone, as I say? And what do we do? And, you bring up the election, and the point I try and make on the election whenever it comes up is people have transitioned from saying the election was stolen because of problems with voting machines or votes appearing, and they say it just wasn't fair. The Hunter Biden laptop coverage, it wasn't fair. Tech companies suppressed information. So we'll go round and round and round and round, back and forth, if we keep on with that type of argument. There will always be something that people will they're going to take it to their grave. I've said it a million times. They're going to take it to their grave. Al Gore, George Bush. John Kerry, George Bush. People think Barack Obama didn't legitimately beat John McCain. I forget the group they were talking about back then that actually got disbanded. Was it Acorn? I forget who it was. But there's always been people who have come out after an election, whenever they lose, and say, it was stolen, it wasn't fair. So we'll keep going round and round in circles on that. So why I think we should stop going round and round in circles on those things and why it matters, we'll wrap up with that, because I said there's got to be a reason for this. There's got to be a reason why I think it's important to have these conversations, whether it's me or you or whether it's anybody else out there who agrees, disagrees, agrees, but agrees in a different way. We have agreement, we agree in a different way. And why it matters is the same way in the military, we can't have low morale. We can't have low morale in this country. And that's exactly what we have now. We cannot defeat our enemies and prepare for the future, whatever the future is going to bring, if we have low morale in this country. I don't want our military, our men and women in the military, feeling like they don't have a good commander-in-chief, or they don't feel like they're fighting for a country that's worth fighting for anymore. I don't want our enlistments to start dropping off because people just don't have that same patriotism that they used to have. And if we stay divided as we are, and we can continue with this emotional knee-jerk reaction to everything that we're having, we're going to have lower morale, and the hatred is going to continue. Seeing the other side as evil is going to continue, and you know it, and I know it. It's going to end badly for people. There's going to be violence. We know it. It's going to lead to violence, and everyone will point the finger, and then that's when everyone will say, we got to all come together. We got to all come together after the fact. We should be saying that now. We shouldn't be waiting for that horrible, violent moment that makes January 6th look like a picnic. We shouldn't be waiting for that to happen for people to realize it's time now for us to stop with all the nonsense, stop with our addiction to the nonsense, stop with our addiction to scoring points against one another and winning the news cycle, and just get back to, as I said, we don't have to come together and hold hands and love one another. We just got to get back to a simple dislike and disagreement of one another. There's nothing wrong with disagreement. Nothing at all wrong with disagreement. So I thank you for coming in and disagreeing with me on some of these issues. I think it was a decent conversation. I'll listen back now and I'll see if I'll post this. If you got the better of me in the conversation, I won't post it.
Figures.
But I will say to you, I was impressed with you, impressed with your answers. And as a son to a father, I've never said it to you before, but thank goodness for Mom. Am I right? I wouldn't have stood a chance if it wasn't for Mom. But thank you for coming in.
Well, it takes two. So you can praise your mother. She deserves praise, but it still takes two. So I was there.
Okay. Well, all right. Whatever you say, you go ahead and keep on with that one. Thanks a lot, everybody. I really appreciate you staying tuned for that long. That was my longest one ever, I think. I apologize. I was having a good time. I got to just wrap it up quick here. So thank you so much. Please share this one. My dad will love it if you do. He'll love it if you do. Please share it. Was it scintillating? Was it dramatic? Maybe not. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe we just need normal conversation. Thanks again. Please help me out. Help my dad out. Make him feel good about himself.
You see, I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative.
Give a rating. Give a rating to this episode if you can. Give a rating to the show if you can. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Hey, I didn't know Google Podcasts wasn't on anymore. Google Podcasts is gone. How about that? But you know where to find the show. Follow the show, rate the show, share the show. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Hard to make it right. Not long ago, before I win this fight.